What's up, Chris?
What's up, Anthony? How are you?
How's the weather in the Midwest? Says the guy from Hawaii, antagonistically poking the bear.
You can poke the bear today because we're happy to say it's about 78 and sunny. Now,
Hell yeah, right
this
on.
coming weekend, it's going to be the low of 35. So that's the Midwest. So that's what we
Yeah,
get. We get all over the place, and sometimes not one weekend to the next. Sometimes it's hours to the next hours. So, but it's starting to become a nice spring. So just coming off a big rain event for hopefully a lot of restorers in the Midwest that we're able to help some people and get busy. But weather's good here. I won't ask how weather is there. I really don't want to know. So
it's you'll be happy to know it is gloomy and rainy, and it's actually warmer in the Midwest than it is in Hawaii. It's
oh wow.
probably I think it's 62 degrees in my office right now.
Okay.
So
But it's still
yeah.
early. Give it till this afternoon. It'll be 80. I
Oh
reckon.
yeah, no, it'll warm up. It'll
Yeah.
warm up. I'll be sipping a glass of whiskey on my deck at 5 o'clock, basking in the sunshine. So don't worry.
That's good.
I get taken care of, man.
Yes. Life's tough out there. That's good.
That's for sure. All right. So if I'm a restorer and I'm trying to figure out, what information systems I should be using that best benefit my business, how would you describe to me what E3 is? And indirectly, you're helping me too, because I think I understand it in theory and concept, but what's the elevator pitch, man? Who the hell are you?
Yeah. The elevator pitch for E3. I'll give a little backstory to start. Um, my mentor growing up in this industry was Kurt Bolden. Chuck obviously had Chuck DeWald had his father Chuck, and I think those two gentlemen were very instrumental in kind of starting to put some framework together for the structural drying industry. And then we had a whole lot of others that helped along the way as well, and are still helping today. And what Chuck ultimately wanted to do was he was trying to answer the question of what is the evaporation ability of the air. That's what ultimately causes the water that from the building materials to evaporate. So what is that, and what is the single metric that can help answer that? Was something that temperature, relative humidity, grains, vapor pressure, dew point, none of them as a single metric tell us what the evaporation ability of the air. So he went on that mission, and it was about 5 years ago when I met him and went to the first class, and ultimately was sitting at the RIA on a panel and listened to kind of E3 for the first time. And so E3 is the single metric that tells us the evaporation ability of the air. So to give you some premise behind it, if I'm drying your house and I got an E3 number of 200 at your house, and I got an E3 number at my house of 100, what that means is your house is going to dry, if everything stays the same and the conditions were to be identical throughout the course of that water damage, that your house would dry twice as fast as mine. And once he was able to establish that, it's looking at the total energy content of the air on both the bound water and the free water side. So there's two sides to the equation. And on one side, it's the bound water, and on the other side, it's the free water. And then once we had E3, then it was applying daily drying targets to it. How do we control open and close system controls, and evaluating drying equipment at the same time?
Okay. So if I am like, like probably a good phenotype here, right? Old school, boy,
Mhm.
dude, I was down at the hydro lab.
Yep.
I remember when I opened my location in Lansing, I started it with a minivan and a Hydro X with a vac pack. So
That's right.
I'm cut from that cloth.
I am too.
And if I'm used to using old school calculations to determine equipment, what's the big difference between like my old school calculations of cubic foot and everything that's referenced in the S500 versus what E3 drives for me? And like I'll put some guardrails up for it too. In a business perspective, right? Like if I'm a
Yeah.
business owner, why should I care?
Because as a business owner, the one thing owning a restoration company that I always wanted was consistent, repeatable results. And that's what we were all trying to get. And I was on a call the other day with a customer, and their big thing was we are getting different sizing of projects done different ways by different project managers. We need to find consistency. And currently, there is no dehumidifier calculation in the standard of care, but it is in the appendix, right? And the thing that you can find with the detailed calculation in the appendix is we can both view the same project through two different lenses, and we could both choose different things. And what we found is that creates controversy on the back end. And that gives an open window to the carrier side of the consultant to say, well, why'd you do this or why'd you do that? Because you can say you need 3 dehumidifiers and that other person could say 2. And actually, based off some of those calculations, you're both right. And that's a challenge. So what we wanted to utilize is science and math every single time and specific metrics, so that if you're at a specific elevation, if there's in Honolulu, the outside conditions are going to be different than the Midwest. We can, and it's not that it's just different and we just say, oh, it's a little bit open or it's a little bit closed or it's going to breathe any of those things. We're going to ask for specific metrics. What's the class of the loss? What's the exact grains per pound outside? What is your specific elevation? And then size that, and then size the project, and not just size it and say, we need to remove this many pints per day, but we're going to take it one step further and say, based off the manufacturer specs of this specific piece of equipment, that's how many you need. Restorers are seeing right now that on the back end, TPAs or carriers are saying, well, you used 2 extra larges, but you could have used 1 extra large and 1 large. That's a challenge that happens a lot. And what we want to explain and push to the TPAs and the carriers is that we're sizing the project based off the equipment that was utilized on the project. And then once it's been sized, the next step for that the standard of care currently does not provide is, how do we evaluate the drying chamber? And then how do we evaluate those dehumidifiers, desiccants, HVAC systems, air conditioners? How do we evaluate that equipment to know it's doing the right thing? Too often, we put all these numbers on a psychometric sheet, we write them all down, or we plug them into some software, and that's it. The equipment's running, it's going, I've taken down some readings, but there's nothing that's evaluating that, that's telling me as the restorer, am I doing a good job or not? Is my equipment performing optimally in the specific condition that it's sitting in? And that's what E3 helps the restorer and the carrier at the same time to evaluate that water damage through the same lens.
Got it. Seems complex, Chris.
You know, you're correct. It is. It can be very complex. And when I sat down and took the first test with Chuck, and he taught that class 5 years ago, it was extremely complex. He had 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper with all the E3 targets on them, all the E3 metrics, the open close system, the grain depression, all these long calculations that he had came up with. I said, Chuck, nobody's going to do this. Yeah. Nobody's going to go out in the field, right? Nobody's going to go out in the field and use these complex algorithms to come up with the answers that they truly need. We need an app. We need a consistent workflow. And so that's when we went on the journey of building the application and starting to integrate the technologies and working towards that. Because a very, very complex E3 algorithm that can take up 4 whiteboards and be 10 feet long is condensed down to enter the temperature and the relative humidity or the temperature and the grains inside of an app, and bam, it gives you an E3 number. So again, technology is definitely making the use now of it extremely simple. So complex algorithms, but through technology and through integration, it's going to be something that is very simple to use out there in the field.
Got it. And what are, of your client base, what are they experiencing? Those that have gone through the process of maybe they're on a Mica or a dry track or, Encircle, and they're making the choice to change to E3 for equipment calculations. What are the outcomes that they're seeing?
More consistency. And when they do,
like, I'm gonna stop you. When you say consistency, what do you mean? Like, if I've got 4 trucks on the road that are actively drying projects, what is the consistency that I would expect to see?
I'm going to consistently be able to see that my team is sizing that job exactly the same way. So all 4 projects, from an air movers, dehumidifiers, floor drying systems, if I'm using desiccants, are all being sized the exact same way and evaluated the exact same way. So they're getting more consistency on the front end when they're evaluating that process. And then when a job takes them 5 or 6 days to dry and they've hit their targets each and every day, and they know that they've dried that thing the fastest they possibly can, in the event there's any pushback on the time in which it took or the equipment in which it took, that they have a lot more to stand on than what they used to. We give them in that user manual all that information that they need to help them support. Not just, I think the ICRC standard does a phenomenal job to tell us what we need to do. They say what we should do or what we shall do out there in the field. And the one thing that we want to do with E3 is E3 does not contradict the standard. Barry Costa said that publicly many times. It actually complements it. And how does it complement? Because E3 helps to tell you how to go do that. And so, from a drying standpoint.
Yeah. So straight question, right? And I saw this live at the Big Flood, Kevin Dooley's event, which was freaking incredible. Like probably one of the coolest things I've done in 10 years. And at the event, they were using in-circle hydro and they were using E3 and they were running equipment calculations and getting different numbers, right?
That's great.
I'm assuming this may be a gross assumption, and because Chris isn't here to have this conversation with us, but I'm assuming that the in-circle numbers are driven off of that appendix in the S500. And so
I believe in that scenario, he was using the air mover calculation. So he would have been using, I believe, the air mover calculation that's in the standard, I believe.
Okay. So, but we're getting different numbers. And you're saying that, look, we don't conflict the standard. We support the standard. How do you reconcile a difference in equipment calculations with that statement?
When you're looking at the air mover calculation specifically, that air mover calculation, what Encircle had put up there on that screen was a range of air movers, right? 9 to 13 in this room, 5 to 7 in this room. But it doesn't say what they're using. And in his slide, he didn't get into what we said. We sized that job based off the exact specific piece of equipment that Kevin wanted to utilize.
Interesting.
Because if it's 9 to 11 air movers, what air mover? Because if I bring in a low profile air mover versus an axial, I'm going to get a drastically different result. If I bring in, let's say that I potentially bring in, because there's a lot of guys out there that this is the case, I brought in half of one type of air mover and a half of another type of an air mover, right? Half of my air movers are centrifugals and half are low profiles on this job because that's what I have available. How do we size that? Because if I just tell you 9 to 11 air movers, what does that mean? Does that mean I can go down and get a Lasco box fan from Walmart? Or are we going to do this based off specifically what is being utilized on that project and size it based off of that? And then not only just tell you how many you need, we're going to tell you exactly where you need to place them based off of what's wet. So if the walls are wet on the perimeter, we'll tell you exactly how many you need on the perimeter based off the class of loss and the linear foot that's wet and the type of air mover. Same thing above 2 feet, same thing with the ceiling, and same thing with the center of the room. So there's a difference there where we take what the standard does and we just expand upon that to give a little bit more clarity to the restore.
You just sold me on it.
Good.
Like I was a little doubty, Chris. I'm not gonna lie. I had some doubt in my mind, and I'm like, you know what? And that was not an easy question, but fuck, man, I'm sold. I like it.
I've had the opportunity the last few years to be a part of drying or consulting on some of the largest projects. And then we dry some of the smallest projects every day, right? Just residential homes. And the guys that are out there that are working E3 and using E3 are consistently seeing the results that they've been looking for. That's the people that come to our class are looking for, just that kind of how behind the why. They know why they're there, right? We're all there to do what? Extract the water, but we evaporate water for a living, but we never had a single metric to tell us how to go do that and then to evaluate that. And that's the piece that we see that the industry is in need of.
Awesome. So go back in time. How'd you get involved in E3? Weren't you just some knucklehead restorer like myself from the Midwest at some point?
For sure. I definitely was. I definitely was. My history, I was working in a factory when I was 19 years old. Out of high school, I was going to be a plumber, and the plumbing company didn't want to pay me very much after standing on top of a shovel for a year. Gave me a 10-cent raise, so I went to a factory, and I was in a factory working 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. And my buddy said, "Hey, you want to come clean carpet? You can make the same amount of money and work during hours." I said, "Sure." So I went to Stanley Steamer, local carpet cleaner in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Worked there for about 2.5, 3 years. And then at 22, me and my wife, Angie, started our own company. And so for a couple of years there, we just cleaned carpets. And then we started water out in 2002 and really started into restoration in 2004. And then, fast forward 15 years, basically traveled, did hurricanes, I don't know, however many, 13, 14 of them, whatever it was, done a bunch of that, worked at home, did all those things. And then Ben Justison actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, will you sit on a panel with me and Parker Olson? Chuck DeWald's going to be the moderator. Will you sit on this panel and we're just going to talk about professionalism in the drying industry?" I'm like, "For you, Ben, I'll definitely do it." The guy has done a ton for our industry. The least I could do was go out to Phoenix and do that. And this is coming off of his whole lawsuit that he talks about. And so happy to help. And so I go down. I was like, well, I'm only 2 hours from Indy. I've never been to Chuck's class. I've always went to Kurt's place. Kurt passed away 2 years previous to that. And so my love for the industry in 2018 and 19 was definitely not going in the right direction after Kurt passed. And so I go down, I sit with Chuck before. I said, "Hey, we're going out to Phoenix. Like, tell me, what questions are you going to ask? I would like to know what the process is going to be." He's like, "I have no idea. We're going to go out there and wing it." I was like, "All right, sweet." So after that, I came and sat in that first class with him. And for years, I remember going to the hydro lab trying to figure out, why are these things happening? Why, when we go in and we put this dehumidifier in this room, we always come back the next day, put dehumidifier in, and it's so hot in this room? Why can we not control this? And why, when I go to Florida after a hurricane, does my water out trailer not work as well when it does it in Fort Wayne in the middle of the winter? Why are these things happening? And what is really truly causing it? And how do I control it? And the son of a gun over 3 days answered all my questions. Every single one that we were looking for from a drying aspect and to understand psychrometry, he was answering all those questions and laying that math out for us. And after that, I just signed up for the next class the next month, and I signed up for the next class the next month. And then I came like 3 months in a row, and he's like, why you keep coming? I was like, I want to know this. I want to understand this. And so I don't believe I've missed an E3 drying class in the last 5 years. Since that point, since my first one, I never stopped coming. And so I just wanted to fully understand it. Obviously, Chuck and Dave were kind enough to make me a partner in the company and the school side and the technology side. And so that's kind of my journey, man, without going into a lot more detail. But that was it. That got me here.
Right on. So why do you stay in the industry? Like I always say, like nobody's in this industry because of the money. Like maybe some are, right? But most of us aren't. Like it's just not a place where you can make enough money to make it worth it, I feel like.
For me, early on in the industry, or while I still had my restoration company, the one thing that I loved was when everybody ran one way, I always wanted to go the other. That was me as a kid and me through my childhood. And when I got my taste of my first hurricane and I watched everybody going north on 75 out of Florida and I'm heading south and nobody else is going that way, I'm like, this is for me. I love that rush. I love that challenge. The one thing I've always enjoyed about the drying industry is the challenge of every job being different, and being able to be there to help people in some of their most trying times. People don't have water damages every week or things like that. And when they do happen and you're able to show up and you're able to change what is potentially one of their worst days
Mm-hmm.
to just bring them a sense of security, a sense of calmness, a sense of, I know exactly what we need to do to put you back the way you need to be and get this structure dried. No matter if it was 100 square feet or 100,000 square feet, we knew the steps, we had the training, we had the tools. And I always enjoyed working with my team, delivering a very, very high level of customer service to clients in those times of need.
Awesome. So looking at it through the lens of E3 in your user base, who makes a good customer for E3? And like, because not all products fit all companies, right?
That's right.
So who, like, when you guys are looking at restoration companies demographically, like, tell me, like, when you're in that sales cycle and you have a customer meeting, you're like, what makes you go, these guys, we can make a difference, they should buy our product and it's going to work?
Guys that want to do their job right. Guys that have a desire to do that drying project effectively, efficient, and in the best manner. Those are the people that we have found have implemented E3, followed through with it, and done it. Because we all know that implementing technology or making a change in our industry or change in your company is extremely hard. It is
Oh
not
yeah.
easy. Anybody that says, oh, we're going to go put this new technology in your company and it's going to be roses and berries and be pretty, it's just not. I've done it in my own company. I've tried to help other companies. It is a very, very challenging, big lift. When you got a team of people that are ready to click and be on the same level, we found those people to be very, very good clients. We thought initially, looking at it, that we would go after the residential market. There's more claims. There's more contractors doing residential work. We'll find that to be a better space to push. And what we found was a complete opposite, that the guys that were performing the commercial work were the guys begging for this information the most. And
Hmm.
those have been our clients out the gate here, that have kind of tracked with us the most, because there's the most on the line too, right? A guy that goes in and sets 60,000 CFM and 2 weeks later calls us for some help and we tell him he only needed 30,000 CFM, or vice versa. He sets 30
Yeah.
and he needed 60, right? These are real dollar. I mean, this is high level dollars, a lot of importance and a lot of eyes on those types of projects. And we found that those guys that are looking to do those projects correctly have been great clients. And then it has transitioned down to the guys doing the residential that want to do it the right way every single time and dry these structures instead of ripping and gutting.
Mm-hmm. Why is it more impactful in the commercial size? I guess I get it at scale, but what's like, if what prompts people to call you and say, Chris, I need your technology to tell me specifically what it is? Like, is it a, I'm getting pushback from the carrier because they think I'm crazy and putting too much equipment in? Like, put it in a bucket for me that equates to dollars and cents, because I know it does.
Yeah, good question. So, couple things. They're challenging me on how much equipment I'm setting.
Yep.
They're challenging me on how long it's going to take to dry, or they're challenging me on, is my equipment working properly
Mm-hmm.
inside that space? Or a lot of times in the commercial space, I have a project, I'm just going to say it, a multifamily or senior living facility, and I got no thermostats on my equipment. I need to maintain 80 degrees while I put 100 people in this building because it was a Cat 3. I need to demo the building. I can't have the temperature go up too hot because of the occupants and or the workers inside the building. So how do I get to that specific temperature while also drying the building as much as I can during stabilization?
Mm-hmm.
E3 answers those questions for them.
Has the technology gone through any sort of legal action or litigation?
No,
Okay.
No, it has not. The patents are finishing as we speak. I got an
Got it.
email an hour before you. I jumped on with you, so those are in their final stages. Should be done here within the next week or so. But no, have we been involved in high-level projects that are in the legal realm? Absolutely.
Mhm.
Have we been called to court? No.
Okay. Interesting. Because why? Like it's never gotten that far, or because people review the technology and they're like, oh, okay, this makes sense. They just
Um,
never feel the need to go that far.
it just hasn't went that far. I don't know 100% there. When we share the information, we're obviously sharing all the algorithms behind it. It's all
Yep.
very wide open. In our user manual, all the algorithms are right there. So, I think from a legal aspect, it's all right there. We haven't had anybody that has ultimately called us. I know that there's guys that have had projects that have used E3, let's say 2 years ago, on the
Hmm.
project that are currently in legal. Now,
Interesting.
will E3 get called to the mat per se, or get called into,
Yeah.
or me or Chuck get called in to testify? Time will tell there, but we currently have not.
Okay. Um, Kind of another question along those lines. If I make a change from, one of the known products and methodologies to E3, am I going to be placing more equipment, less equipment? How would that change impact my profitability as a business owner? Like I align with you on the merits of doing it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to take it like right is right. I totally understand that, but I can't I have a harder time justifying right if I make less money, right? I
That's
have
right.
an easier time justifying right if I make more money.
I think everybody in the industry knows and understands that they make more money doing mitigation, and that we all make money off of renting equipment than we do doing reconstruction or tear out, right?
For sure.
And so, and I am in no way, shape, or form talking about a category 3, but E3 still applies to a category 3 loss, because we still have to dry
Mhm.
it. We just have to go through and demo and clean it first. And so, from an overall dollars and cents standpoint, I'll say that more often than not, we find in the files that we've reviewed, I got the opportunity to review 100 files with the team over at Exactware, and
Mhm.
we reviewed 100 specific files. And what we found on probably 80%, I believe it was roughly 82% of those files, that the equipment was undersized. So the restorers
Interesting.
were not putting enough equipment on the job. We would
Okay.
think that everybody would put too much on the job.
Yeah.
More often than not, we found that guys were not putting enough. And when you started to run, like they ran some numbers, if it took 3 days to dry our flood house, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days to dry our flood house, and started running net margins against those. And the one thing that we found is everybody in this ecosystem, being the contractor, the policyholder, and the carrier, when utilizing E3 on a project, is going to win financially. And the person that actually is going to win the most is the carrier. The carrier
Yeah.
actually has the most to gain from this from an overall standpoint. But from the contractor standpoint, they are going to get that more consistency.
Hmm.
And we all know that on the back end of that project, there's a lot of back and forth. If I don't have to take as many concessions because I have science and math, and I have the documentation to back it up, I should be able to recoup more dollars and cents. And a lot of times when contractors are sitting at a point negotiating that claim, and they're taking things off their bill, it's because the carrier's asking really good questions that they just don't have the ability or the answers to them.
Yeah.
And that's what people that have left the E3 drying class have said the most is this now gives me the information that I needed to have those types of conversations. So it shouldn't be an argument. That's the thing we
Hmm.
don't want to see. We want to see us elevate the industry together alongside everybody at the IICRC, the RIA, the carrier side, the TPA side. This is all to make the industry better as a whole.
Hmm. So you said something I'm going to circle back to. You said ultimately who wins the most is the carrier. Can you tell me why the carrier wins the most and why you as a restorer should care? And like, because quite often, the dialogue is like contractor, carrier, and to hear somebody speak in that direction where we should have alignment with the carriers is unique. So I wanted and you just kind of like in your Midwest style, just kind of like, oh yeah, la la la. You just bumped along and glazed over it. I'm like, no. I think that's real important.
We're gonna go back to that.
Yeah.
Why does the carrier win the most? Because financially they have the most at stake from an overall global standpoint. Yep. That's why financially they're going to win.
And how do they win financially though? Is it decreased claim cost? Like, be specific.
So for them, if they have a drying project that's been evaluated, their cycle time should go down. They're not going to, what do they ultimately want to do? We put a group of 100 claims consultants or claims representatives in a room. What's the most important thing to them? A closed file. Mm-hmm. If they have a drying project that's been evaluated through science and math, that they can close faster because they have specific metrics that tell Nelson's Restoration that he did all of these things. And now they have currently they don't have metrics to evaluate your process from the drying standpoint. Once they have those metrics in place, it will close their cycle time down and ultimately deliver more consistency, which they've shared with us will help them on the underwriting side, the risk side. Mm-hmm. And so that's where they see help. Why should the contractor care? The contractor should care because that directly affects their cash flow. If that carrier can close that claim faster and evaluate their claim quicker, that to me as a contractor is going to get me paid quicker and ultimately put me in a better financial spot. And if I can get to the point that I can view this project through the same lens as that TPA or the same lens as that carrier as the contractor, then I definitely know I'm going to win more and I'm going to have more profitability because now I got consistency across my company and all projects. And on top of that, I'm not having these negotiations on the back end about a large dehumidifier, a small, an extra large, and all of those things. If I can eliminate a lot of that, because that's a cost to us as contractors that currently we don't typically bill for.
Yep.
When I send you an invoice, you might pay me in full, no questions asked, but we also might negotiate 10 times through email. It's hard to recoup that cost. And so we're trying to say, if we review this project from the drying, just the drying aspect of it, right, through science and math, and we're consistently looking at this through the same lens, being the carrier and the contractor, we should minimize what that overall resistance is on the back end.
Got it.
And that's what we find more when we go out and consult is we get there and J.S. Held, Young and Associates, Sedgwick, somebody's there on the other side to have a conversation. And they're asking a lot of good questions. And the contractor just can't give them an exact answer. A lot of guys will go out to these big projects and they'll size desiccants based off air exchanges per hour. Mm-hmm. When they go out and do that, you might say this job needs 2, and I might say 3. On a big job, that can be a drastically different amount of equipment with a drastically different cost. Evaluating that job through 2 different lenses, it doesn't matter how many times we change over the air. It matters how much water we're removing from the building. That's what we need to evaluate it based on and evaluate the equipment off of. And so once we give them those answers, it definitely makes the process a lot simpler on both sides.
Got it. Okay. I've got 2 more and they're easier. I promise.
All right. That sounds good.
Everybody's like major pain point in the industry right now is, disparate platforms, right? Like guys have to clock in one place. They have to log job notes in one place. They have to document drying in another place. what integrations do you have currently? And then what, if you can, I know some of this is subject to NDAs, but what are you working on? What are you hoping to accomplish in the future?
Yeah, great question. We had the choice early on. This is 3 years ago, basically. We can try to do a complete project management system with E3 in it, or we can build E3 to integrate with other software systems. The sentiment that you said, where it always goes back to nobody wants another login, right?
Yep.
I don't want to log into all these different software. So we build E3 to integrate it. That was our goal. Can restorers go out and use E3 as an app today out in the field? Yes, they can. Are they going to have dual entry just like everything else? Yes. So where are we at? Currently, we are integrated inside of Phoenix's DryLink app. And so
awesome.
users can use DryLink and use E3 inside of their phase one of that integration is done. Phase two will bring some additional calculations from an a la carte standpoint, but from a workflow standpoint, they can use that. Clean claims, it's been said enough out there that we've integrated with clean claims. We're in the final stages with them. Met with Lane while we were out there in Dallas at the RIA, and he's just a few days of development away from that. So he's moving in that direction. We're finalizing everything. I'm actually meeting with Tom McGuire tomorrow from Large Loss Mastery and The Edge. So he's got that out in beta right now. So guys are using that, and they're just using E3 and Tom's helping restorers get to that initial ROM up front and an initial estimate on these big projects, which can be very complex. And his software does a good job of helping restorers to do that. And we're just helping with getting their square footage. We're not affecting the price. We're just affecting the amount of equipment that's within that price. So on the back end of his system, just helping to support that. And then others, obviously we're all up there with Kevin and Kahi and looking to integrate there. Had some good conversations with the team at DocuSketch. We have said this from the beginning. We want E3 integrated in all field documentation systems that are out there. We believe that it provides a value proposition to the restorer and give them the opportunity at that point. Instead of them having to have just one choice, we wanted to be able to deliver our technology inside of multiple different technology suites for the restorer, then to choose what works best for them. And so we're going to work on that. That's our goal, is to get this thing integrated. We thought, me and Chuck, at least from me and him personally, we are not technology space guys. And so we thought these things could happen a whole lot quicker, and it definitely takes a lot longer than what we thought. But we're starting to get some good traction and some good movement, and some of these integrations are starting to fall into place.
Good. Last question. If I have a technician who's got 2 years of experience, let's say WRT and ASD, but hasn't taken the specific, DeWalt Drying Academy E3 class, what's the onboard time for them? Like, how long does it take to get them stood up in the app to a level of proficiency?
That's going to take them. So a lot of the guys that come through our 3-day class, when they leave, they're going to have the proficiency to go out there and do a job. How long will it take them? Once they start doing it over and over, it's going to take a few months for them to get really, really proficient at it and using it. The biggest thing that we tell people, how do I train my team at home to use E3 better? We always say, pull out your old files. During your trainings, pull out your old files and run your old files through E3 and evaluate them. And at that point, it's sometimes some of the best learning experiences for our technicians and our project managers, because now, without having to make the decision out there in the field, we can put multiple eyes on this same thing in a group setting and say, we did really good here. That dehumidifier wasn't working here. What could we have done differently? And so that type of a training we found to be really, really good. We need to do a better job on our end to help support that onboarding process with some training videos, which we're working on, getting some more training videos to try to shorten that time frame for those users out there.
Got it. Fair's fair. I've asked you a lot of questions. Do you have any for me?
Are you ever going to move back to the mainland? Are you going to always live in Hawaii?
So here's and I wrestled with this in 2022 when I exited Premier, because the first time in 15 years, I didn't have an entity that I was attached to that was location specific.
Mm-hmm.
And Hawaii may not be forever for Anthony Nelson, but I'll tell you what, I look at the lifestyle that my kids are raised with, and like the fact, like my big kid, she didn't wear shoes for probably the first 5 years of her life until she went to public school, and you just can't send a kid to school without putting shoes on them, right? Like that's wrong. We know
maybe
that.
In the Midwest, just not in Hawaii, right?
Yeah, well, in the Midwest they freeze off, and so there's a cost there. But like quality of life and everything is really good. And when I walk off the plane after being gone for a while, like, there's like this sigh of relief that I go through because I'm home, and it is slower and people are generally kinder. But that being said, I've got brothers who are 10 and 13 years younger than me, and a sister who's 18 years younger than me. And I think about raising children with them all the time. Mm-hmm. And they're spread out, one lives here, another one lives in Australia. My sister's still at home. But if they all moved back to the Midwest and decided to have kids and raise them there, yeah, I could see that being the thing that's like, all right, yeah, that's a reason to leave, right? But short of that, I don't know, man. I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, good. Well, last question.
Yeah.
In your overall thoughts, what could we do to help elevate the industry with E3? And how could we kind of co-collaborate with some of the others out there that you feel would kind of help to, I think your goal, my goal, as we sit here and at our point in our careers, is I want to be able to give back to the industry and make the industry a better place for when we leave it. And anything specifically that we can do, we want to be a part of that.
So my advice for you is to continue to walk down the path that you're walking down, using truth as the guidepost and the cornerstone to set your direction. I think that that's one thing that is inspiring and we need more of in our industry. Like I asked you a few hard questions around business, right? Because generically we all want to know how to drive the right way. We want to know how to do this, but we also have to make sure that it fits in with our business and our ability to pay technicians and keep them on the road.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that being honest with our truth, but also being honest with the pressures that we have is very important. And I've seen you do that very eloquently time and time again. And so it's less of a, like, don't change course. It's more of a stay the course.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. And we'll continue to do that. That's for sure. I appreciate you and everything you've done for the industry, everything you do within the ISCRC and RIA. You're just a busy man, and what you do with John's, with Pivot, you guys have elevated that. And you guys John was a huge point of influence for me in the final 3.5, 4 years I owned my business and getting it to where it was. So I appreciate everything you guys do at Pivot as well.
Absolutely. Any closing thoughts before we turn off the live switch here?
I appreciate you. Thank you for the time, and happy drying out there. And we're here at E3. If we can help anybody out there, we're here to help.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you as well. Aloha.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Take care.